back to Friday Night Vedder Mysteries. I'm your host and mystery guide, Wolf Luger. Before we begin, I just wanted to mention that I had a very interesting week since we last spoke. As I mentioned to you last time, I'm a retired private detective. After 25 years in the business, I felt I achieved all I ever wanted to in my career, successfully thwarting evil in every step of the way. But then this week, something very interesting happened. I received a letter in the mail, very mysterious. It was a warning. I don't know quite what to make of it. I'm getting a signal from the director to continue, so let's get back to that in a bit. I'm sure you're all eager to hear the conclusion of this riveting story of dueling and how one's honor was to be protected, be it to the death if necessary. And a question before we begin. The attractive enigma Lola Montez. What might her role be in all of this? While I can sense you're dying to hear the outcome, let's listen as our narrator, Ed Stone, sets the stage for the conclusion of An Affair of Honor.
Paris, at all events, was not given a chance to forget. During the days that followed, the fatal encounter in the Bois de Boulogne became one of the main topics of conversation in the cafes and the boulevards. It was even discussed at the royal table of Louis Philippe. Soon, an ugly rumor began to circulate that Charles de Jarier had not fallen in fair fight, that the duel had been marked by quite a number of irregularities. De Jarier's relatives sought not only compensation, but justice and revenge. Aided by friends as well as newspaper articles, they managed to persuade the authorities to sit up and take notice. Some months later, a high court ordered the immediate arrest of de Beauvollon and the Vicomte de Equeville. Public feeling in Paris had reached such a pitch that it was felt an impartial jury could not be secured in that city. The trial, therefore, took place on March the 26th, 1846, in the Palais de Justice at Rouen. More than 30 witnesses were summoned, and these included Alexandre Dumas and Lola Montez. Although dueling was illegal in France, the law was virtually winked at, and the unwritten law held good that honor must be satisfied. Briefly, the charge against the two prisoners was that, contrary to the rules of the game, de Beauvollon had been allowed to practice with the pistols beforehand, thereby gaining a distinct advantage over his opponent. If this could be proved, then the duel had amounted to virtual murder. As witness after witness was called by the Crown, it became evident that an attempt was being made to show that de Beauvollon had forced the quarrel, which had been of a trivial nature. Many of these people had been guests at the supper party on the night in question, but when confronted now by the president, their memories proved strangely blank. And then Alexandre Dumas's name was called, and the man who was famous throughout France stepped briskly into the witness box. The president, however, like so many English judges, was not disposed to take common knowledge for granted.
And your occupation, Monsieur Dumas?
Ha! If I did not find myself here, in the birthplace of the illustrious Corneille, I should call myself a dramatist.
Just so. But there are degrees among dramatists, I believe.
Dumas's evidence consisted chiefly in a lengthy discourse on the history of dueling through the ages. Although he was firmly of the opinion that the accusation against the prisoners was fully justified, he could offer very little in the way of concrete proof.
I am the last man in France to suggest that honor should not be satisfied. Even so, I did my level best to bring about a friendly settlement of this dispute because, like everyone else, I know that the odds were so heavily weighted against Dujarrier that he didn't have a chance. What did it matter if de Beauvalon had practiced with the pistols? I say to you, Monsieur le Président, that de Beauvalon had already killed Dujarrier in the morning of uttering the challenge.
No.
Lola Montez had been heavily veiled, and as she now stepped into the box, there was much nudging and whispering among the spectators. But when she uncovered her face, there followed a general gasp of amazement at its pale beauty and the large violet eyes that later were to bewitch a monarch and command his kingdom.
Oh, my God. He told me the quarrel was with Roger Darcy. And God help me, I believed him. I could handle a pistol far better than poor Charles. And had I but known, I would gladly have gone out to meet de Beauvalon myself.
Vicomte d'Ecqueville was the first of the two prisoners called upon to take the stand. The president examined him at great length, but without obtaining any new facts. The public prosecutor then rose to cross-examine.
It is a fact, is it not, that you led Dujarrier's seconds to believe that the pistols were your own property?
Oh, that is quite untrue.
Untrue? Do you then say that Alexandre Dumas, for one, has committed perjury in this court today?
No, madame, I merely say there was a misunderstanding.
Did you not tell Monsieur Dumas you had paid 700 francs for the pistols?
I did not. I said they had cost 700 francs.
But without adding the all-important fact that the pistols, in reality, belonged to de Beauvalon's brother-in-law, the editor of Le Globe.
Oh, Monsieur Dumas did not question me so closely.
Did you say that Dujarrier's seconds would have agreed to the use of those pistols had they known them to be the property of your principal's brother-in-law?
Oh, Monsieur Dumas had my word for it that de Beauvalon had not practiced with them.
It is the reliability of your word, Vicomte d'Ecqueville, that is on trial here today. No further questions.
It was with an air of suave self-confidence that de Beauvalon entered the box, and well might he feel optimistic, for he had briefed as his counsel no less a person than Maitre Berrier, acknowledged as the greatest master of forensic oratory in France. Thus he answered the president's questions boldly, and the hint of a smile often lurked in the corner of his mouth.
You have heard many witnesses state that they considered the grounds for this duel to have been trivial.
I myself was not of the same opinion, Monsieur le Président. I had every reason for demanding satisfaction.
You know that it's my young man, Charles Dujarrier, was quite unversed in the use of lethal weapons.
Yes, and had he but chosen the sword instead of the pistol, I might have been content merely to disarm him, or at any rate to teach him a lesson. As it was, he chose pistols. Am I to blame for what happened?
You have heard it said by Dujarrier's seconds that after he had discharged his pistol and was obliged to stand still and wait, you took an unduly long time in returning the fire.
I do not agree.
So long, in fact, that one of them, Roger Darcy, called out to you in desperation.
Monsieur le Président, I have little doubt it was just that interruption which disturbed my aim, and with the fatal result. I had merely intended to inflict a flesh wound.
Nevertheless, do you swear on oath that you had not practiced with the weapons beforehand?
I swear it, Monsieur le Président.
For the defense of the two prisoners, Maître Barrier relied almost entirely upon his own brilliant powers of oratory. Towards the closing stages of a long speech, which dealt with hard facts rather than supposition and theory, it became evident that he was making a profound impression upon the stolid, unbiased Rowan juryman.
Gentlemen, the question as to whether or not there were sufficient grounds for a duel between these two men is surely immaterial and wholly irrelevant to the accusations brought against the prisoners. Their delay in arriving at the appointed place on the morning of the encounter has also been explained. The cab was unduly slow. Moreover, they were obliged to call at the gunsmith on the way for powder. Surely this is a sufficient and natural enough explanation. On the other hand, we've heard much evidence, and I think we have all grown tired of hearing it, that in this case the one de Beauvalon was an acknowledged master in the art of dueling, whilst the other, de Jarrier, had never handled a weapon in his life. Monsieur le Président, members of the jury, I am going to refer once again and finally to that same evidence. Whereas it has been freely wielded as a weapon for the prosecution, I now seek to wield it as the chief and obvious weapon for the defense. I'm going to ask you to inquire of yourselves, as sane individuals, whether a man like de Beauvalon, an expert shot, about to go out and meet an adversary who was, in effect, no more formidable than a child with a pistol in its hand, would take the trouble, or would have the smallest need to practice with weapons beforehand. Regard the matter in that light, and your answer must be that the accusations against the prisoners is laughable. So laughable that you and I and all of us here in the court today are but wasting our valuable time.
After a short address by the president, the jury retired to consider their verdict. They left behind them a courtroom that was stifled in a tense atmosphere of speculation and argument. Half an hour later, they began to file back into their places.
Mr. Foreman, have you arrived at a declaration?
We have, Monsieur le Président.
Do you find the accusation against the prisoners to be true?
On my honor and on my conscience, before God and before man, the declaration of the jury is that it is not true.
The prisoners are found not guilty and will be released forthwith.
Stop, Monsieur le President. The prisoners must not be released.
Who dares to interrupt? Have these people arrested for contempt?
But, Monsieur le President, we have fresh evidence. A new witness.
Then it is too late.
You are sure of this? Where is the fellow?
He is here, Madame la Prosecutor.
Order! Order in the court.
Monsieur le Président, as you rightly say, the trial here today of Rosemont de Beauvalon and the Vicomte d'Aiqueville on charges amounting to murder are closed in the prisoner's favor and can never again be reopened. But I beg you, in the interest of justice, to hear the evidence of a witness who has only this minute arrived from Paris by horse and cart, a man who has hitherto kept silence because he feared for his job, but a man who in the 11th hour has succumbed to his conscience.
I must object. The trial is concluded. The prisoners have been found not guilty and are entitled to immediate
As
discharge.
Maître Berrier says, they are entitled to be discharged. At the same time, Monsieur le Président, it is within your power to forbid them to leave the court until...
I fail to see what useful purpose can be served.
But you will see, Monsieur le Président, and you will no doubt consider what further steps should be taken in this deplorable matter.
Very well. So long as it is clearly understood that nothing can disturb the jury's recent finding, I will hear this witness.
Paul-André Laval,
Yes, madame.
by whom are you employed?
By the Vicomte de Equeville.
Do you remember the morning of March 11th last year?
I do, madame.
What time did you arrive at your work that morning?
Soon after daybreak, getting on for 8 o'clock.
Was there anyone else about in the garden at that early hour?
Well, I didn't think so, not to begin with. That is, not until I heard the...
Will you tell the Presidente exactly what you heard and saw?
Well, madame, I heard pistol shots and it frightened me at first, until I looked over the hedge into the kitchen garden. And there I saw the master and Monsieur de Beauvalon had a pistol in each hand. And I watched him shooting at a target out on the wall at the bottom end. After a bit, it seemed as though they suddenly caught sight of me, for the master quickly hid the pistols under his cloak, and they both walked back to the house.
And you are quite positive that that was on the morning of March 11th last year?
Madame, the 11th of March is my birthday.
Oh, well, it had to be right. Oh, how could he forget that? Yes. Oh.
Vicomte d'Equeville and Rosenbaum de Beauvalon, it seems that Providence alone has spared you both from a conviction for murder. But if this man has spoken the truth, and I see no reason to doubt his word, then you are both proved to be arrogant liars and a disgrace to the honor of France.
Oh, yes.
I therefore order you both to be rearrested and charged with perjury.
Justice at last. Oh.
And André Laval's evidence was later corroborated by facts. Traces of the target, roughly marked out with a sharp stone, were found on the wall of the kitchen garden. Moreover, even in those days before the use of bullets, experts were able to say that the indentations visible on the wall had been caused by balls from the identical pistols used in the duel. In the trial for perjury, which took place some weeks later, both prisoners were found guilty and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. Thus was played out the final sequel to the most famous and sensational duel in the modern history of France. And yet, just as men and women have often given their lives in a seemingly unknown cause, so was Charles de Jarrier's tragic death to prove a stepping stone along the path of civilization. For it is a fact that the rapid decline in the practice of dueling, which marked the latter half of the 19th century, can be traced directly to that bleak March morning of 1845 in the Bois de Boulogne.
And we hear again, crime does not pay. De Beauvalon meets his fate and sits pondering life in a Parisian jail. Our mystery is solved. Or is it? Lola Montez. Perhaps her allure is a reason de Jarrier loses all sense of reason and agrees to the duel. Interesting questions, but ones I'm not sure to which we'll ever get answers. Reminds me of the letter I mentioned I received this week. I mentioned it was a warning. It was unsigned, with no return address and was written on what looked like parchment paper. There were these 8 words on the parchment in Sharpie marker. Beware never to return or take the breaks. Now, this is a bit perplexing, I must admit. I'm not sure whether to take this as some sort of threat from an old enemy or maybe a warning from someone that prefers to maintain anonymity. Am I scared? Hell no. Wolf Luger doesn't scare. But what do you think is going on? Oh dear, we're out of time. All right, let's discuss this the next time, and then I promise. And speaking of next time, don't miss next Friday night's mystery, A Pearl in the Hand. A fascinating tale of the lure of precious gems and the interesting cast of characters involved. That's next week on Friday Night Vedder Mysteries. I'm your host, Wolf Luger. Join us next time. Or else.